Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Conservation and Heritage Advisory Committee. My name is Paul McLaughlin. I'm chair of the committee, and delightful to see everybody. First item on the agenda today, before I go any further, is to announce that, and some of you will have known, is Councillor Robin Turner has passed away, and past member of this committee, gave long service up till about 2018, so a great shame. So apologies for absence. We have James Boone and Robert Evans, I think. They're the only ones that I've got before me.
Matthew Wild.
Oh, Matthew Wild as well, yes, of course, yes. Moving on, late items to be introduced by the chair. I'm not aware of any late items, so no. So, declarations of interest. I think, Max, you've got a declaration.
Yes, I have an interest in the first item because I read the Heritage Impact Assessment.
Okay, yeah. Fine, thank you very much. So we'll just ask you to leave the room on that occasion. We are going to, I'm just going to adjust the order slightly so that we've got two officers in to deal with the draft local plan. So we're going to deal with that one first, if that's okay. So applications, minutes of the last meeting. Has everybody had a chance to?
There's a couple of changes regarding which have already been incorporated.
Yeah. Okay. So everybody happy with the previous minutes? Yeah. Another proposer, please. Yeah. Chris, Paul. Thank you. Praise and second. Applications not being considered today. You've all seen the list. Was there anything on those lists that caused any concern that you wanted to be discussed? No? No? Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Applications determined since the last meeting. Again, you had a list of all the applications determined. You will see that most of them we had no objection, but the St James's Yard one, some amendments were made and subsequently it was given approval. If you recall, that was the container design. I think you had something to do with it. No, okay. Right, so moving on, we'll go to applications to be considered after we've dealt with the draft local plan for Derby. As you're all aware, there is an emerging draft local plan. Consultations are out at the moment, due back by the 9th of March. We're very fortunate and pleased to have a brief presentation from Bill Stevenson, head of strategy, just before this meeting. So explained the situation, but our remit is specifically to deal with the heritage aspects, and if there are any outer or peripheral elements of the local plan that have an impact on heritage, which there inevitably are, then we need to discuss that again. So I'll open it up and ask for comments in relation to the local plan. Chris, would you like to kick off?
Yes, certainly, Chair. Well, thank you to Philip, Richard and Katie for making the presentation earlier and giving the opportunity to comment. My view was that the document as drafted very adequately deals with heritage matters in many respects. You know, sort of when you go through all of the policies, then it's quite frequently mentioned that the heritage has to be taken into account in various ways. So I thought a great deal of effort had been put into achieving that. I just got a few minor comments in detail. I thought the paragraph 56 it should require some recognition that heritage is one of the important aspects of creating a good, attractive living environment. Should get some recognition there. I thought policy H7, which relates to housing multiple occupation, which we often seem to have before us, should have recognised that an important consideration is heritage of the building itself, and that should be listed as one of the criteria that ought to be considered in appropriate cases. It's missing from that at the moment. I thought policy EN19 seemed to confuse designed and designated. I thought it might even just have been the word processing that might have caused that confusion. It just required another look at, I think. Sometimes designed applied, but I think it was actually intended that it should have said designated. And the final sentence of that policy, it shouldn't be there at all, really. It's a double negative, and I think all it's trying to say is that if it's not in line with national policy, it shouldn't be approved. But that would apply, in almost every case, in all the policies. You could say that, really. So that perhaps wanted to be. I thought the deal dealt with. CC6 deals with tall buildings, which we've had a good look at many times, and I was pleased to see really that it fairly adequately deals with heritage in terms of significance, but also the skyline work that Mel Morris had put a lot of effort into, and I thought that was quite well crafted. I was pleased with CC14, the railway station quarter, again an area that we've discussed in our meetings, and as a personal matter, I felt pleased that there was recognition of the need to achieve a better arrival environment. I think we've spoken at times of the when you arrive in an important city, you come out of the station, and in many cases you're impressed with the scale and quality of the buildings. That sadly is not the case in Derby, and I think if I were an investor, I'd sort of just turn around and think, I'll get back on the next train, really. So that is an important bit of the city that needs improving, and it does recognise that redevelopment sometimes is appropriate even in heritage areas. So that was good. I think overall a lot of efforts obviously been put in by those involved, and we must thank them for giving so much attention to heritage matters. I think we recognise that it's perhaps better that heritage is intertwined into so many policies rather than just dealt with as a separate chapter. So it's been integrated into the whole content of the think otherwise that was it, really. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, okay, thank you. It's worth mentioning that Phil Stevenson in his presentation highlighted the fact that Derby City's housing allocation was basically needed 18,000 new homes, of which they are only going to be 12,500. So there is significant pressure. 2,700 of that is going to be in the city centre itself, and another balance of about 2.5, 2.6 is going to be outside the city centre. Clearly, that's going to put a lot of pressure on density, particularly implications on tall buildings. So we are pleased to see that policy is included in a fairly robust manner. So yeah. Anybody else would like to make a comment? George, would you like to?
Yeah, so I thought that generally it was good to see that what they drafted going beyond national policy into quite a lot of important areas, both in terms of opportunities like the Darley Abbey Mills and the need for the bridge there, but also in terms of the problems. So, for example, policy on advertisements and vinyl wraps. No more than 25% of the shop frontage to be covered in vinyl wrap. Again, very small thing, could have been wrapped up in an SPD and buried somewhere, but good to see it's at the forefront of the policy for everyone to see. And then other matters like Chris talked about policy H7 HMOs, but we do have our own separate standalone policy for conversion and adaptation of historic buildings. So that sort of adequately deals with any conversions.
Okay, thank you, George. John, being a planner, do you have anything to?
Unfortunately, having not been able to make the presentation and not yet had a chance to study the plan, I don't have anything to add at this moment, but I'll be happy to report back.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, yeah. There were a few other points discussed. GD1 dilution of approvals. It's been a long time concern of mine that when planning approval is given, that the end product doesn't actually live up to its the sales pitch which the scheme design presents in the first instance. There are new tools available to the council to ensure that this won't happen anymore, or to a lesser extent. And that we got assurances that there will be increased enforcement action against things like this through the staffing programme for City Council. We also mentioned about urban grain, and this new modelling tool will actually help ensure that new build in conservation areas sensitive to listed buildings fit the urban grain far better than they have done in the past. I think anybody else got anything to add? No. No.
Just a question, Chair. I wondered to what extent the new plan reflects the proposed new NPPF, which is out of consultation at the moment. I don't know if that was explained in the presentation.
Yes, it was, and basically it was looking at this is essentially only a 5-year plan because of the changes that are going to take place in local government and national planning policy. Richard, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I mean, just to confirm that the plan that we're making at the moment is being prepared under the December 24 NPPF. Yeah. So, obviously aware that the emerging NPPF is out of consultation at the moment. And yes, it does create a bit of a sort of alignment kind of issue, but as it currently stands, we're continuing under the December 2024 NPPF. I think what we need to do in the background, we don't want to do anything preemptively to amend based on a draft of the NPPF because we don't know exactly what will come out before. But I think we do need to keep half an eye on what might need to change, because it's one thing to prepare the plan under the plan making regime for December 2024, but then clearly there's the decision making element of it at the end. So we don't want to adopt the plan and then on day one suddenly be out of kilter with the decision making element. So I think we need to almost keep in our back pockets what we might need to change, possibly, if the changes as suggested in the emerging NPPF come to fruition, and then it might be possibly that through modifications if I went having to tweak things to create that better alignment towards the end of the process. If that
I was suggest actually. What's that mean?
You have lunch?
Bat echo. I think what we need to watch out for is permitted developments, and I think that's going to be particularly for us, is because that's when the rug gets pulled from under your feet. Permitted developments, particularly when it comes to reuse of buildings, and that's the bit which I think we need to keep an eye on, as because they're the bits that you can slip in with the local plan to kind of safeguard.
I mean, obviously the local plan can't take away permitted development.
No.
It would need to be done under Article 4.
Yeah.
So that's a slightly separate way. But I mean, yeah, it is. It's quite a lot that can be done under permitted developments, and clearly the local plan needs to sit around what those rights are. If we wanted to remove permitted development, I think it would need to be done under a separate process. With one more free.
Yeah, that's correct. No, it's. I know things like the office to residential conversions caused some trouble years ago in terms of the poor quality of layouts that were arrived at, and things like Section 106 agreements being sidestepped and things like that. And a lot of the London boroughs did go through the Article 4 route, but they were challenged on them, and so it is. It's.
I mean, listed buildings, you
Yes.
don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But conservation areas,
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
So this is the bit that we need to keep an eye out on.
Yeah, and
These permitted developments within the conservation areas and how.
I mean, a lot of them are under prior notification approval, so there are various criteria that need to be met. It's not just an automatic permitted development allowance, so there are various things that need to be objectives that need to be met. But yeah, it was part of a drive by government to, increase the flexibility of spaces, basically. But the HMO, the Article 4, the Article 4 HMO that was effective May of last year, that's been in response to the pressure and the affordable housing issue that's affected the growth of HMO accommodation.
It shouldn't necessarily affect here us within Derby City Centre, but class queues are something which surprised me actually when I looked into class queues. It's a free ticket.
Yeah.
Yeah, virtually.
Got relaxed. Wow, that's not part of
That doesn't concern me.
The World Heritage site is obviously an important consideration, and again, I need to look at the detail, but I wonder to what extent policy governing the World Heritage site perhaps takes account of slightly changing context there. We had the visit, which Chloe will know about, by UNESCO last year, and the report which followed it, saying things like all applications in World Heritage sites and the buffer zones should now be accompanied by a UNESCO compliant heritage impact assessment, whether that's kind of referencing policy. And I understand they're working on a revised management plan.
It's quite heavily reinforced in there. So the importance of the World Heritage site is significant in the heritage element of the local plan. So
great.
It's worth also mentioning that there is at the moment being carried out an assessment of parking areas around Derby surface parking areas to see if any can be freed up for development. Obviously that's work in progress at the moment, but the idea is to create a sort of a modal parking, peripheral parking system around Derby with improved transportation policy, which I know is a key concern of yours, Ian. So that's work in progress at the moment.
So just one question. The maps that are in the consultation, I assume they'll be uploaded to a digital format, not just in PDF format.
Policy which is all interactive online. The intention will be at that point in time, whether that's either in the regulation 19 or submission, will get uploaded.
Great.
Okay. Anybody else have any comment, any observations? Chair? Tim?
Are the observations we've made today, are they going to be taken on board and included in the local plan? Or are they going to be cherry-picked or ignored?
Well, the discussion we had with Phil earlier and with Richard and Katie is that they've made extensive notes and are going to try and integrate these into.
That would be good.
Because
Yeah.
this is the process. They've come to us for comment. I'd be disappointed if
Yeah.
that it was watered down or lost in translation. But I'm sure we've got to rely on the integrity of the officers to do that.
Jolly good.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And thanks to Richard, Katie, and to Phil when he previously came in. If you could record that as our thanks. But generally, I think we're encouraged by what we see with the draft local plan. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, we're going on to applications to be considered, and the first of which is the floating pontoon. Max, if I could ask you to step out, we'll bring you back. Do for. Okay, so we have an application, full application for a floating pontoon to access the canal boat down by the Silt Mill. It's quite an interesting little piece of design. Moves up and down with the flow of the river and the swell on the river. So, yeah, Chloe, would you like to give us a brief explanation that shows the overheads?
Yep, certainly. So in terms of the information that you've already seen online, this is the location.
I won't be able to hear you. My hearing is impaired.
Okay, sorry. The location of the pontoon is adjacent to the Museum of Making. Just trying to scroll down. It's not responding.
No. You keep doing that. So the new pontoon is actually adjacent to the step, the fire escape steps that you can see on that photograph. Originally, the water line actually went right up to the edge of the Silt Mill, as you're all aware. The fire that destroyed the majority of the old Silt Mill, the base is still the original Silt Mill. You can see just on that photograph on the bottom on the right hand side, the top of the arches form the original one. So the walkway, I think, dates back to the pre 1919, I think it was, something like that. So yeah, that was. That's all right. Well, just like Chloe, as you all had a chance to look at it. Any thoughts? Any comments?
So you said, sorry. You say it floats, and if the river floods, then what happens?
The pontoon goes up.
How? So it will keep going up. Would it remain safe if it keeps going up?
Yeah. It's on two arms effectively that will rise. So as the water goes up and down, those arms allow the pontoon to go up and down. I suppose there will come a point where if Derby's underwater, that will exceed its limits. But it's obviously been designed very carefully to make sure that it just
not go the danger.
Yeah. They've taken the flood risk assessments and so forth that have been associated with the application. So yeah, it is a valid point, but one that's been considered.
I walked down there earlier, and other than the current mooring, which is so miserable,
Yeah, indeed it is.
it's, other than providing some shelter from the rain, which was quite nice earlier, it's just so miserable. I think it's a great idea, and I think it's the right place for it as well.
Yeah,
I do. I think it's the right place for it, because it brings you to where you want to be at Cathedral Green. Obviously, it can't go any further down because of the weir, but no, it's the right place for it. And yeah.
Yeah, I think it's secured by gate access, so it should be okay. Chris,
Yeah, I would say that point, Councillor Pandy's made about the height of the water and so on. I did read that they'd allowed an extra metre against, even above the highest level that's ever been. So I suppose
So now we will be safe.
they're looking ahead, in that respect. That's good. And I don't think we need worry too much, Chloe, because we've all been able to look at the drawings, and I was very much in favour of the proposal. It's got the tourism benefits, and there's obviously been careful consideration about the impact on the adjoining buildings and the World Heritage Site, and it does exactly what the planning framework says. That we should do things that open up the significance and reveal the significance, and this is exactly doing that, isn't it? It's allowing people to to go up and down the river and so on. So it sounds a great thing, and if they could get it in place for the 50-50 celebration or whatever, which they seem to be intended to. And I suppose just final comment is I thought the heritage statement was very well done.
very good, very interesting.
Wouldn't say that if it was in the room.
That's in case Matt listens to the playback later.
Welcome it. Obviously, it's added attraction, to have that down by the Silk Mill, and a great location. I just wanted to check that it's not going to impede access in any way for people who. I mean, that's quite a good walking route if you're walking from the city down through Darley Park, and you can walk all the way down there. So there's not going to be any question about that.
No, it's set waterside of that walkway,
Right.
so there's no.
Yeah. So it's gated onto the pontoon sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got an illustration there now. You can see the walkway clearly on the top plan.
Yeah.
And then the floating pontoon.
There'll be no restriction at that Silk Mill end at all for people to get. No, that's all good then.
Just kind of playing devil's advocate. I was mentioning the rain earlier. I mean, when walking along Victoria Embankment or something, you often see these pontoons, and sooner or later a canopy comes along for either the rain or for the sunshine, for example. And if we ever get any.
It's in the shadow of the building, so it won't make a difference.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, would there be scope to put any type of seating or covering or in the future?
If they wanted to, then they could come back with another application. But at the moment, we're just dealing with what we're presented with. But yeah, I think if the intention works and it's successful, then yeah, I think I would probably encourage some sort of protection in the clement or inclement weather. Councillor Pandy.
I don't know whether you would know the answer for this or not, but what's the lifespan for such a project in general or average?
No idea, really. I suppose as long as the Canal Trust want to
So
operate.
permanent pontoons, how long is there a lifespan for it?
Well, it's a fairly robust structure, so yeah,
It can last forever.
it could do. Yeah.
Or even longer than that.
Sorry, can I ask what question? Do you want to ask what colour they're planning to have the railings in and the walkway itself?
So sorry about a few IT issues there. There's an existing steel railing going along at the moment. The proposal is to remove part of that to provide a gated steel gate access onto the platform, and that's adjacent to the current fire escape. The material that's proposed is recycled plastic boarding with wood appearance in terms of the surface material of the pontoon. It's also constructed and painted in black.
Great. Thanks.
Is there any signage in the application? Because there's lots of signage on Exeter Bridge.
There isn't any shown
Nothing
within the
in
application.
I didn't do it. Okay, so generally we're all very much in favour of it. Yeah, great. So, do you want me to contact Max back?
I'll be in on it.
Thanks.
Every watercourse units, that'd be ridiculously expensive. Actually, I reckon if you counted the actual things that the pontoon is floating on, I reckon that'd be less than 25 square metres.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When there's 2,000 square metre exceptions.
Right. And the next application we've got to look at is an outline application for the replacement of Derby Assembly Rooms on the marketplace. All matters reserved except for access, a phased mixed-use development comprising a hotel and ancillary uses, an office building and a multi-use cultural building. You remember we had a pre-app presentation regarding this a couple of months ago, at which Councillor Lakin suggested that they change the name from Derby Maid to Merlin Centre, which I thought was a very good idea, but it clearly hasn't been fed through. Yeah, 3 separate buildings being proposed. Now, this application, as I said, is an outline, and what they've done is actually given us a design code, effectively, for the 3 elements. They've done it in such a way that, yeah, they've approached it like an architect would approach any design, but actually written it down and said these are the parameters which potential future developers may well take on board or need to take on board to complete the building. There are some illustrations of what the building could look like, but we ought not to be overly influenced by those. I think we've got to look at it as an outline application and in the relevance of the policies that we've got. It's interesting to note that the levels of the building, the heights of the buildings, just give you a very brief resume. We're familiar with, we talked earlier about the tall buildings policy. The significant element, which is the hotel, it actually falls into the category, or I should say first, that this area around the marketplace contextually under the tall buildings policy is designated as a 5-story area, whereas as you can see the hotel element actually becomes a larger what they class as a larger building under the context. So that's the other buildings. Derby Maid fits in with the scale the old Barlow Taylor building on the side, and then at the back of that, the new office development again is, I think, 30 metres height. So, Chloe, if you could just go through some of the illustrations we've got,
Certainly.
talk through those as we go through.
So this is the master plan that you've seen in terms of the 3 components you've already examined online. These are the visuals.
Yeah.
That,
So they're illustrative visuals, not necessarily the completed building.
As part of the proposal is the demolition of this building, 34 Ford Street.
Yeah.
There's a number of parameter plans, both in terms of the uses of each of the 3 buildings, both at ground floor and at upper level. There's plot extents, maximum and minimum, to control in the future. The dimensions of the route through the site.
Market gate, as they call it.
And there's a parameter plan in terms of the maximum AOD, so the maximum height of the building. There's some extract from the code in terms of maximum building heights. So as you have seen, it's the habitable building envelope, which is shown in blue on the screen, and the roof articulation zone, so the roof plant zone in the yellow. And then obviously there's a lot in the application.
Yeah, you
just selected a few.
Yeah, there are a multitude of views, but these are a few selected ones showing Derby made in the green, the hotel in the pink, with the just see the office building peering over the top in blue.
So here's the view from outside the council house looking towards the development, and along Corporation Street near Exeter Bridge.
Yeah.
Some further views from in front of the Museum of Making.
Yeah, interesting on this view, the middle view you've got there, the amber is actually number 1 Cathedral Green, which they're saying obscures effectively the new development. But you can see the implication on the cathedral as well on the lower photograph. Thanks. No, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. So again, bottom photograph, you see the cathedral green. Yeah, they're obscuring. Yeah, and the view from the forecourt, the frontage of the cathedral, and then from the market. Okay. So that's the outline application. I personally think that an outline application for this is it's such a sensitive area is actually not appropriate because we're lacking information and detail, and whilst the codes are really good, constructive, and what we'd expect to see, we still don't know what the final outcome is going to be. There are precedent illustrations in the reports that show where they've been around Derby and looked at various buildings and taken precedent from those, and then they put some precedents from elsewhere. Now, the illustrations that they've taken from around Derby show a really richly detailed architecture, whereas the precedents that they're thinking ought to relate to the new buildings are actually rather formulaic and mundane. But that's my personal view. I'd be interested to hear what the floor has to say. Anybody?
Are we, right, so within the design code, are we moving forward with mandatory and recommended? Sorry. I.e., when I come down to mandatory recommended, we spoke before about materials, for example, material palette, mandatory material palette. So we can have some kind of control over the materials that are going to be used in the marketplace, like stone or
They give you a colour palette,
yes,
but they do not give you a material.
a material palette. Because I think we were talking earlier about watering down.
Yeah.
This is exactly the.
I'm really pleased you've said that.
Okay.
I didn't want to say this, but yeah, my view of these codes is that they could potentially be watered down quite significantly, and that's my big concern.
Chair, I think one term that our colleague Suki has used in the pre-application process and as the applications become live is that he wants to bake in the detail. So not dilute it after the event, but bake in the detail so that the design code is very clear as to what's in it. So his view is, and he's had, as soon as it landed, he perused it, is that the design coding needs to be exceedingly tight and detail baked in so that anybody who picks this up will know quite clearly that these are the scale parameters, they're the layout parameters, they're the material parameters, they're the parameters that will shape the development. So the degree of change will be relatively small.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So that's a term he's used. If you want to use it again, if you
Yeah.
bake
Well,
in.
I think it's a very big term. Baked in. Yes. Inherent. Yeah.
And another comment I'd probably make is when because this is going to be adopted. So when this moves to highways team for adoption, that's when visuals like this they change because they don't necessarily comply with adopted standards so I think that kind of early buy-in from highways of what materials we're showing here. Are these the materials which are of adoptable standard, or when it comes down to it, are the future design teams going to come into a challenge, trying to achieve what we're expecting them to, but also crossing the highways bit of getting an adoptable specification.
It's a good point because we've come across it elsewhere, and you're quite right that when you get to technical specification, you're dealing with engineers, structural engineers, drainage engineers.
Got the section 278 to sign off.
All that technical specification, and it can be if you're looking at load-bearing issues with refuse vehicles.
You can't use these slabs because they'll crack,
etc.
You can't use these stone because you can't get a discard over them.
So it's an entirely valid point that the public realm,
and that's going to really make a difference to the quality of that environment, public realm space.
Okay, thank you. Chris.
I've sort of lived in a world in recent decades that is quite different to the situation we find ourselves in Derby, and sort of it. If you look at developments that are taking place in sensitive parts of the UK, Liverpool Street Station, for example, there is far less trust being deployed than there is in our situation, and I'm very uncomfortable, to be in the position that demolition can occur, which is now agreed. In the absence of a scheme, and we haven't got very much scheme for certain. This is it's all on trust. Sort of, well, it could be like this, and so on. So we've kind of moved to a situation where we're hoping it all turns out okay. And that makes me feel very uncomfortable, really. Because it might not turn out okay, and we might just end up with a big hole, or we might end up with a scheme that's not very good. That's now where we are, and we've got to make the best of it, I suppose. If it was me, I'd be not relying on a code, sort of as in its own right, but would, if contemplating granting an outline planning permission, I'd be wanting to make sure there were conditions that were very precise, not just build it like in line with the code. If there are important considerations, they need to be actually listed as conditions, one after the other, and that's quite a big job. But it's worth doing because this is the marketplace of a city. It's a very sensitive location. It's not only in conservation heritage terms, but in economic and social terms. And every effort should be made to make sure it doesn't all turn out to be a poor outcome. And so I wouldn't be relying on loose wording in a code. I would have wanted to have seen a scheme in detail. I'm not really familiar with a situation where outline applications are acceptable in conservation areas, for example, and certainly not in city centre marketplace.
Quite right, because
so it's all making me feel very, very uncomfortable. So every effort should be made to make sure it doesn't turn out badly.
Yeah, because this is the most important civic space in Derby, and architecturally, and in the context of listed buildings, the most important. And that's,
I've sort of sat in rooms with developers over many decades and heard fine words, and promises and sort of intentions, but they don't always turn out.
No. I mean, they've painted a picture, and you've got to admire what they've done, because it is quite clever. And as I said before, it's the process that an architect would go through in developing what we used to call a brief for the site, and it needs to go further than that before anybody can actually judge it properly.
The other thing I might just, sorry, a lot of the visuals that we've seen, a lot of the information that we're seeing is centric to the marketplace. But this also faces the cathedral. It faces the cathedral green and the Silt Mill. So I think that's a really we're missing this. I've yet to see this information. I've shown some possibilities of how rooftop bars could work with fantastic new views of the cathedral, which I think are wonderful. If we could have some roof terraces which could frame new views of the cathedral at night, which would look wonderful. But we haven't really got that much information, and I don't think it's in the design code either.
No, I think you're right, and there are no assessments from distance either, which again, with the hotel building and the office building, I think are important, particularly the north aspect. There is something else I'll throw into the mix, and that is the heritage statement in terms of demolition of the hub. Is very light. It's just going to be demolished. But that building has a history, and there's no real justification for taking it away. It's just a building that's got to be taken away. So I think, in my opinion, that's a bit of a failing on their part as well. Max?
I endorse everything you and Chris and Paul have said entirely. I might add about that this, regarding the heritage statement, that quite apart from making a fleeting assessment of the previous building, the site itself has a history going back 1,000 years. And normally, if you're writing a heritage assessment, you put that in. And after all, there was a lot of archaeology done when the present assembly rooms were built, only partly published. The heritage is important, but we have to remember that this is a conservation area. It's littered with the listed buildings, including Grade 1 listed building, which is the cathedral. There seems scant attention has been paid to Section 66(1) of the 1990 Act, which requires a consideration of the setting. The height of the hotel is utterly unacceptable in what is a medieval marketplace. It was always knew that if this site was going to be redeveloped, it could only be viable if tall buildings were used, and this is the consequence. But really, it's good if it ever happens, of course. I mean, I'm personally consoling myself that my last decade or so of my life, if I'm lucky, will be spent looking at a large water-filled hole, which I had the pleasure of doing in the 1990s. But if it does take place, it needs to be very, very carefully scrutinised. But it would be better from our point of view, I'd have thought, especially if the design of modern buildings are being taken from precedents in the town, because 20 post-war buildings in this town have been unfortunately of a dire standard, that we all would agree, with one or two minor exceptions. So that's never an encouraging thing, but I think we need to recommend refusal on all the grounds that we've mentioned, most emphatically. This has got to go back and start again. And basically, I don't think the scheme is at all viable anyway without ugliness and tallness. Anyway, that's all I've got to say.
Thank you. So, Councillor Fundy here.
It's for my own understanding, because I'm not an expert in architecture. If I understand correctly, Valiant building is a modern architecture, right? Right. What sort of architecture is this then? What's been proposed for assembly room site?
It's a modern architecture. It has some interpretation of historic content. So it's
What sort of historic content?
Well, they quote the frontage of the council house. Look at them. Well, I'm just saying what's in the report. So they identify that that is a colonnaded frontage. So they've used that as a design precedent there. They've looked at buildings where the corner entrances have been used. So again, they've used that precedent on there. So there is historic reference, but in interpretation architecturally, there is a lack of sensitivity. There is a lack of, well, in somebody's opinion, in scale. And there's certainly a lack of detail in there. John?
I think the most sensitive elements for me are the height of the hotel and the office block. I know there's some concern about tall buildings in and around the cathedral. And obviously the office building is quite closely approximated to the cathedral, and I can understand that because, you know, the cathedral tower ought to remain the dominant landmark in this part of the city. And with the hotel building as well, I do worry slightly whether it sits comfortably relative to the council house and magistrates court marketplace. I get the impression, I got the impression from the presentation we were given, that those two buildings are particularly tall because they are the commercial elements of the scheme. Yeah. Whereas the public building can stay low because, you know, it's public money, I suppose. And the justification given was, there's already tall buildings on Paul Street, so just following that pattern. But I'm a little concerned as to whether the impact on the cathedral, the silk mill, that the historic core of the city has been fully considered and not. What I'm sort of grappling with is we have a design code setting parameters in terms of height, that's specified maximum heights, but if I was doing an outline application in a conservation area and I knew height and existing buildings was particularly sensitive, I would potentially do an outline application that fix the height, fix the scale, fix the layout. Perhaps a question for you, Laura. Are they fixing the scale or not? Because it was described as access only to be agreed at this stage.
It is an application with access only or matters reserved, but that's why they submitted the design code, and the design code will set kind of the parameters. So as Paul was indicating, there's the recommended and the mandatory codes within the design code. So when you're looking at those, they're setting kind of maximum heights, and that's what you assess the proposal on, but obviously they can come back down from those. And then within Chloe shared, where you've got the purple blocks and then the yellow kind of roof articulation on top of those, so it sets the kind of maximum. It doesn't set it, it will be this definitive, but it will be within that parameter. But that goes back, I suppose, just picking up on Paul's initial point about the codes, about whether they're mandatory and what's included within mandatory, and then what is included within the recommended. And obviously they are different weighted, and that's included within the red and the green within those codes.
In a similar vein, they've submitted height plans with the maximum height of the building in AOD. Would that be conditioned as well?
It would be conditioned in terms of being broadly in accordance with the parameters plan. So it would be, and they should align within the design codes.
So when it comes forward in reserved matters, they're obliged to follow that.
Yeah, so they could go no higher than those design codes, so that height, so it would be within that banding.
One last comment from me. They've not done themselves any favours with these visuals because they're not contextual. These are sales shots. Yeah, these are sales shots. What they're not showing us is how it sits within the city, which is, I think, where we were alluded to with the model and everything else. But I've seen, I think it was a Ravensmere visual with the tower that's gone on the opposite side of where this ends, and the scale of the cathedral on that shot really does put it into perspective. And the cathedral tower dominates. And I think they need to show the council building on some of these, and they need to show where our you'll actually see the cathedral on that visual, and it's not on there. And I think these are the missing bits that.
I don't think you would actually, because they're very carefully taking it slightly obliquely. So the cathedral would be
But I mean,
not to your left.
I'm just thinking some long, let's some long sections. Let's just see how this sits within the townscape.
Yeah. You would have expected architects as this to have done something like that, but you're quite right. They are sales perspective.
They're sales pitch. It's a sales pitch. But it's not for us. Yeah. It doesn't sell it to us. It sells it to somebody who wants a tower, and not how it sits within the cityscape. And I think
the whole essence of this is really it's a scheme to sell to potential developers.
Yeah.
And you're quite right with what you said, John, about the Derby Maid, can't get my head around that name. The Derby Maid building is lower scale because that's the public face. Rest are commercial enterprises to fund that, and the balance is not right there at all. Yeah.
Just say.
Yeah, sorry.
No. I'll echo what Chris said, really. I think that what concerns me is what we're getting is not as good as what we've got already. And we're demolishing a building to put this building up that we don't really know what it's going to look like. All we're actually discussing really is the parameters of the volumes of the buildings and a design guide to use for its design. What concerns me is an approval of this outline application going to trigger a condition 3, which would mean that the developer could actually demolish the building, demolish the.
That's been separately agreed anyways.
No, but I mean, it's important, isn't it, for us to know whether, if we approve it, if we did approve this outline application, would it trigger the demolition of the assembly room?
Is that the case?
They would need to discharge condition 3, yes.
Yeah. In which there is an agreement.
And is this going to be sufficient detail to satisfy that condition 3? In your opinion? I don't think it is.
Well, I mean, the committee made it very clear on the 12th of February that when they were talking about development of agreement versus contract in condition 3, that they wanted to have the utmost control, Councillor Bonson was there, over what we do going forward. So in terms of the content of this application and then the future discharge of condition 3 would be, you know, for full committee scrutiny. And it's part of, obviously, you're feeding into the application process. There are various other people. Historic England have got to obviously table their views about it, and it all feeds into the process as regards, you've talked about, is it the correct form of application type? You know, historically, I used to work with George Rennie. He wouldn't have entertained an application for demolition of the conservation area in outline. It wasn't allowed, but they have taken place elsewhere in the country in terms of highly sensitive locations adjacent to Grade 1 listed buildings. So it is an approach that is now used. Your comments on what the design coding includes, what it doesn't include, the views that are included and not included, they're all to be fully considered as part of this application process. We've got to be, you know, as decision makers and as decision makers have got to have that confidence that the proposal and all the safeguards are in place. And if they are not satisfied by that, then committee made it very clear. The vote was pretty tight on the variation of condition. It was only 7 votes to 4. So things are in the balance.
I agree, and I think you've set it out right properly. But I think this committee should also confirm that we're not happy to approve this application until we get more detail.
That's an entirely valid comment, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Any further comments?
Just one thing that needs to be very carefully considered is the question of phasing in terms of implementation. You know, and I suppose officers need to think, you know, even though we are only outlined with only access being considered, if it's important that certain elements happen in certain order, then, you know, we need to guard against a partial implementation of something that might be attractive to a developer, and that we only get that. There is a history of this happening nationally, you know, that, so I think that needs tying down, even though we're in fact, it has to be tied down at outline stage. It's no good leaving that for reserve matters applications and so on. So you know, if we're concerned that only part of the scheme is likely to appear, then we need to guard against that.
Right, thank you. I will just throw in the last one. No further comment, Max. But there ought to be room for the ceiling within these codes, the Jacobean ceiling. That needs to sit into this public access building. Okay, so from our point of view, it is an objection because we have insufficient detail, and we're unable to make any further judgments on it. Okay.
Sorry, Paul, just before we move on, you mentioned about the ceiling that needs to go into the public access. Were you meaning that it should go into the public building?
Yes, yes.
because it would also make a very nice entrance to a hotel lobby, wouldn't it?
It would,
But,
yeah. No,
you're
think-
not thinking that you've got to sort of tie
Yeah,
that down.
I think the ceiling itself deserves to have public access.
Yes, yeah.
As
Yeah.
it is the-
Yeah. I just wondered if you meant that it needed to go into the Derby Maid, if you like, as opposed to the commercial.
As a preference, yes, but in the code, if it went into the hotel and it was an open foyer,
Yeah.
no problem.
Derby Maid's on the site where the ceiling once was. so
Yes,
it's
yes,
desirable.
indeed, yeah,
It
yeah.
could do with some context when it's reused.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for that. Moving on to the next application, which is Highfield House, Highfield Gardens, and this is for the installation of solar panels on existing outbuildings. It's Struts Park Conservation Area, and the building is a Grade 2 listed building. You might recall about 2021, I think it was, maybe a bit later, we had an application for the conversion of some of these outbuildings to a residential use. I don't think that's actually been implemented as such, but this is to, we made recommendations at that time about the roofing materials and some of the internal details. But this is for purely for the installation of solar panels on the roof. For the most part, they will be obscured by existing parapet walls around the buildings, because they're all flat roof buildings. So, Chloe, if you could just give us the illustrations.
Yes, certainly. Obviously, aerial view showing the three buildings, which will be clearer later on that you'll have seen. So, see the three buildings and the type of structure which is being proposed to be added to each of those. So on the previous slide, there was the photograph of the building, the outbuilding that was going to be converted to an annex. So that's the first one. There's also some equipment within the garage building that's proposed, and wiring routes to the exterior. In terms of views, the application includes looking around the building where the solar panels can be viewed from. So as well as that building that's being converted to an annex, there's also the garage building, which is the top, at the bottom left, and also the sort of area that's attached to the garage onto the garden, which provides also some flat roof. And we've had some updated information confirming from the applicant to say that two of the roofs are 500 mil, and the height of the structure that's being proposed is 390 to 400 mil, and there's one roof that is slightly lower at 420. So on the information that we've got, the parapets to two of those buildings completely are on the roof to all four sides. So if you're looking at the building, you're unlikely to see it. On the building that's being converted to residential, there's only two parapets, one to either end. So that's this building. So there's only one that side and that side. So yeah, just to clarify that.
Yeah. Okay, so effectively the solar panels will be obscured behind parapets, and then you've also got the added advantage of they're higher, you're lower, so you're not going to see them. It's up for discussion.
Mitigation is concealed by a parapet partially. It's laid in on a removable grid. It's completely reversible. It's less than substantial harm. English Heritage see that renewable energy generation is a public benefit, offset any substantial, less than substantial harm.
That's fine.
No objection.
Okay.
No objection.
Okay, so we're happy with that. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Right. So I think that actually concludes the applications part of the meeting. So yeah, I think we'll formally close the meeting. Thank you.